Good afternoon, all of you friends attending this this seminar. And I want in particular to stress from the outset that I'm very pleased that we are having here a cross-party sponsored hearing. I think it's very important that nature of a cross-party hearing on this subject, the need to ensure protection for our interpreters, in particular when we use them as politicians, as operators in scenarios of war. And
can you just explain, because most of the people have come from the European Parliament,
yes,
about earphones, the languages.
Yeah. So, we here in the European Parliament, more than much more than in any other parliaments, we absolutely rely on our interpreters. With the multilingual reality that is our democratic Europe, a reality which we want, which we cherish, which we want to preserve, because it's this diversity that makes as well the pluralism of this European democratic construction. We rely on our interests. They are so good that often many of us don't even realize that we are relying on them. And I'm really paying tribute to our interpreters in the European Parliament who do a marvelous job here, to the point that we even forgot that they exist, and we can speak in our mother languages, and we have a really excellent rendition of what we are saying in other languages. We are also often traveling all over the world, sometimes in complicated areas, and of course we travel with our interpreters, and it's absolutely unthinkable that we would not provide for our interpreters the conditions of security that are there for ourselves. Sometimes the conditions of insecurity, yes, because of course going to sometimes even the safest places, you never know, you could be in danger in today's world, and it's unthinkable that our interpreters would not, of course, be enjoying all the protection, the conditions to operate that MEPs enjoy. But of course we know that this is not the reality in many places where interpreters have been, of course, exposed to tremendous dangers. Interpreters have been hired from the local communities, and sometimes, and too often, left out of the picture when there is the need for an evacuation, when the war is over. I have been visiting refugee camps in Iraq, in the neighborhood in Turkey, on people from Syria, and how often have I found, in Afghanistan in particular, how often have I found people, how often do you find people in the refugee camps throughout Europe who tell you that they had to flee because they were interpreters, because they were doing some interpreting job for a Western coalition, for a Western force, for a certain Western operator. It's really outrageous that these people who have indeed put their ability, their knowledge, their insight into the working of the society where they are interpreting, are neglected at the moment when sometimes the danger is maximum, are neglected when others are evacuated, or when the mission is terminated, and when, of course, they are exposed to the highest dangers exactly because they have cooperated, exactly because they have enabled foreigners, namely European Union missions or missions in which Europeans participate, they have enabled them to perform their job and to understand the reality in which they were dealing with. How many people have I found refugees? Have I met refugees in camps throughout Europe, in Greece? How many young people, I must say, and families have I met who told me that we had to flee because we were the family of this person who was killed because he was an interpreter for the Western coalition, and nobody cared, not for him nor for his family. And the family has no alternative than to flee and reduce to this difficult, even more difficult by the day here, even in Europe, status of asylum seekers. So I think it's more than time, and I really would like to thank the group of interpreters who came to some of us in the European Parliament, led by Louise Fitchett, to really call attention to this problem, to the need for us, political operators, in this Parliament, but behind this Parliament, at the European institutions as much as in our government, to really understand that interpreters cannot be expendable, are not expendable, that we absolutely need to care for their well-being, and that must take place as well once the mission in which they were involved is over, because that's probably when they are exposed, many of them, to the highest dangers. And so I would like to say that I was very pleased that my colleagues Carlos Coelho from the EPP, Marisa Matias from GUE, Ernesto Urtasun from the Greens, agreed. I think and Javier Nart, who is not here, but Javier, he is also a former correspondent of war, so he now is an MEP, but he understands very well what you're doing, what would as well, not just politicians, but actually journalists do, without the assistance of interpreters, very often local hired interpreters. So Javier knows that very well, so I'm very pleased that he is among us who decided to host this hearing. And I really hope this will be, with the debate that Marisa is going to moderate, with the contributions of Louise Fitchett and Linda Fitchett. And why did I say Louise? I have a friend who is also Fitchett and who is Louise, that's why. With the contribution of Linda and all the other participants, will really make the case and will not make us anymore forget that indeed we must absolutely care for our interpreters. And I'm sure that we're going to hear very, very moving stories, because I know that all of you journalists, I see Manuel Rosendo from Portugal, who's a very well-known war correspondent, but all of us political operators, we can tell very moving stories on how, in many circumstances, our lives depended on the knowledge, the insight of our interpreters. So, thank you so much for giving us the idea to organize this. I'm really pleased and honored to be opening this, and I just hand the floor to my colleague Ernest Urtasun.
Thank you, Anna. Well, first of all, I would like to thank all of you for being here. And I would like to tell you as well that when our colleagues proposed to host that, firstly, I thought it was a very good idea to have many groups hosting that event. I completely agree with Anna that I think this is a matter that needs to be tackled in unity in the chamber, in maximum unity in the chamber, because I think it's a serious matter. So I think I was very happy to do that with other colleagues from other groups. And secondly, as Anna was also mentioning, I had the impression that for once we were dealing with something related to the interpreters, who in this house are like our souls, in the sense that our work could not happen without them, without you. And sometimes maybe as members of the European Parliament we do not pay attention to your problematics, your problems, your ideas, your proposals. And I think this is also a conference that we as members of the European Parliament owe to our interpreter colleagues, and that is why I'm very happy also to host that. I think that another issue which I think needs to be mentioned in the introduction is that I think that today, this conference, our idea would be that we create a lot of awareness raising about a problem that is not so much well known. Every time there is a problem with an interpreter, and we have had in the last years being killed in conflict zones or not being protected enough, it's many, many times just a footnote. And this is actually something that it's not possible, that we need to end, and that I think that one of the things we need to do in this conference, and you have to help us with that in the European Parliament, is to actually raise awareness about that, to identify the roots of the problem, and together to create also a possibility for a concrete agenda for our member states, for our governments, but also for the EU on how to tackle that issue. And I think it's of utmost importance that after the dialogue and the session that firstly Marisa will chair and the rest, that we really manage to create policy proposals that we can afterwards do a proper follow-up of what we will discuss today. But once again, I think all of us, the different MEPs that are hosting that event, very honored to have you here, ready to learn a lot, because we know about some of your problematics, but probably we don't know enough, and I think it would also help us to get in depth into the subject. And also, and I would like to end here, I would like to see this as a first step towards a continued agenda in the European Parliament to tackle that issue. So thank you very much. And now I don't know whether I have to give back the floor to Anna, but probably this is what I have to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Ernest. And now it's the time to give the floor to Linda Fitchett from the International Association of Conference of Interpreters. I just would like to signal that we have among us the General Director of the Department of the Parliament who deals with interpreters. I don't know the name of the department anymore, but I know there's a new name.
Interpretation and conferences.
Interpretation and conferences. So happy that you're here with us. I think it shows how significant indeed this opportunity to discuss these matters is. And I hear as well that Commission have also representatives here, and very good. Thank you for being here. And now let me give the floor to Linda Fitchett from the International Association of Conference Interpreters.
Thank you very much, Anna. Can I call you Anna Gomes? So on behalf of AIC, and most particularly on behalf of AIC's project group on interpreters in conflict zones, I would like to thank everybody for coming along here today. There are many friends, many colleagues. I, of course, worked in this Parliament as an interpreter in the English booth. I can't even find it now. There they are over there for many years. And so to me, it's like kind of coming home. I would like, obviously, first of all, to thank all the members of Parliament who have been so kind to organise this meeting for us, because we certainly believe very much in this cause. It's something that we hold very close to our hearts, and we would like the European Parliament also to take the conflict zone interpreters into their hearts. So we hope very much that this meeting will be very profitable for our cause and for the interpreters' cause. At the beginning of this meeting, I really would like to thank two of my colleagues, former colleagues, from the Portuguese booth, Luís Pinto and Silvia Camilo. Luís and Silvia, about a year ago, it must be now, saw the film that we're going to be seeing a little bit later about Afghan interpreters who were freezing to death, basically, on the Serbian border. Mm-hmm. And Sylvia and Luis came to me and said, look, you are working with the AIC project for interpreters in conflict zones. We have to do something. We are appalled by what we've just seen in this film. And so then Luis said, but I know a member of the European Parliament. So Luis introduced me to Anna, who very, very kindly said she would take this topic into Parliament and do her best to get it through the committees, to talk about it, and to see what the European Parliament could do for us and for the interpreters. So I would, at the beginning of this meeting, like to thank the two people who really initiated this meeting, Sylvia and Luis. I obviously have to thank the members of my own project group who have been giving me a lot of support. I think one of them was to come today, but I can't see him here, so I'm sure they're still giving me their support from home. I do want to say a very thank you to our newly elected AIC president, Uros, who was elected only in this January. So thank you very much for coming along, Uros. I would like most particularly to welcome the members of what has now become a coalition of associations, organizations supporting this cause. The coalition was started back in 2010 with 3 members. Red Tea, which is represented here by their CEO, Dr. Maya Hess from New York, myself, and Henry Liu, who was the former president of the International Federation of Translators. We 3 met quite by chance, and we decided to start working together. And in the meantime, the coalition has grown. We are now 6 full members because we added the International Association of Professional Translators and Interpreters. You can see all the logos up there. We added Critical Link International, which is basically an association which speaks out internationally for community interpreters, and WASLI, the World Association of Sign Language Interpreters, even some of them working here in the European Parliament. And, of course, I'd like to thank all those who support that coalition, because there are many national, European, American associations who also support the coalition. I do want to make a special mention of Red Tea, because Red Tea it's not obvious from its name exactly what it is. It's a not-for-profit organization which advocates for translators and interpreters in high-risk settings, of which there are many, including this one, working for the military in war zones, in high-risk settings around the world. And I've been working very closely with Maya since 2010. She's a very clever lady, and she often has the wonderful ideas that we then try to implement. The joint objective of our coalition is to obtain an international protective document in order to protect translators and interpreters in conflict zones. Mm-hmm. Similar in a way to the resolutions which help at least to protect journalists. And there are 2 of those resolutions which were adopted in the United Nations, and we would very much like the United Nations and maybe the European Parliament to adopt something similar to protect interpreters in conflict zones. These are a few excerpts, probably difficult for you to read, from a resolution that the coalition would like to introduce into the United Nations and have it adopted there. Meyer in Red Tea is very fortunate in that there is a very big international law firm called Oric International who helps us with our texts, and they vetted this text, made sure it was all in line with UN wording and usage. And so we hope that later this year we'll be able to get the UN to start looking at this resolution. And of course, we hope that this meeting in the European Parliament will be an important step forward on this way towards some kind of legislative protection for interpreters. Starting, first of all, here, perhaps bringing about closer cooperation and coordination on protection at European level, because as we know at the moment, it's all very much left to individual member states to regulate. Perhaps, if I might, I'd like to look at a little history of our work in the coalition, of the activities that we've carried out. AIC launched its project group in 2009 when we heard about the death and injury of local linguists in Iraq and Afghanistan. There were some horrendous news stories coming out of those two countries, and we as interpreters, even if we are very much protected here in the Parliament and in other big organisations, we felt that as a community of linguists throughout the world, we should try to help those interpreters who were in trouble. In 2010, 40 members of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which for those of you who are not very familiar with European institutions, the Council of Europe is a very different body. It is not a part of the European institutions here in Brussels. But they also have a parliamentary assembly, does some very interesting work, and 40 of the members there from all political parties, so again, like here, all the political parties were involved, and they signed a members' declaration calling for the protection of interpreters in conflict zones. And there again, I must make a mention of one of our colleagues, Eduardo Cajane from Spain, who was instrumental in getting that declaration signed. So we're hoping maybe something like that will also perhaps come out of the European Parliament. And then just before 2012, in 2010 onwards, when Red T, AIC, FIT got together, we drafted and published a short field guide for interpreters and those working with them in conflict areas. It was intended not only but also for locally recruited linguists working with the military, but also, of course, it could be used for interpreters working with journalists or working with international aid organizations, or even with business people who even go to conflict zones or go to post-conflict zones. That field guide includes points on ethics, the ethics of the interpreting profession, on the need for accuracy, on the need for the two sides, the employer and the interpreter, to respect each other. On training, we do think that a small amount of training at least can always help colleagues to overcome difficult situations. And most particularly on definition of role. We know that in conflict areas, the role of the interpreter is not going to be the same as it is here sitting behind glass. But sometimes we feel that the interpreters in conflict zones are asked to do things that they should not be asked to do, and they should be able to refuse some tasks. They should not, if they are freelancers, necessarily have to work in, let's say, very difficult circumstances. We can't, of course, talk about torture, can we? But we can talk about interrogation, hard interrogation, and we don't believe that locally employed interpreters should necessarily have to do that work. If that has to be done, it should be the military, the staff interpreters that do it. All this kind of thing, obviously, are points which we can perhaps discuss later in the debate. We also, as a coalition, have recommended that the interpreters in conflict zones should not carry weapons. We don't think that the interpreters should be involved in any way in combat, because that puts them into a very different category as far as coverage in the Geneva Conventions is concerned. It's a different matter as to whether they should be dressed in military uniforms. If they are identified with the foreign troops. If they are not, they are easily identified as, oh, he's not military, he must be an interpreter, we'll shoot the interpreter first. So what do? Put them in uniform, not put them in uniform, maybe give them a different uniform. Things like that, it's important to decide at some point what we're going to do. So that field guide is a guide to the rights and responsibilities of both sides, employers and interpreters. Usually, therefore, two people who have not worked together before, and they have to find out how to work together. We believe that the interpreters have fulfilled their responsibilities towards our military, towards the journalists, towards lots of people, and we cannot say the same of our governments. We do not think that our governments have fulfilled their responsibilities towards the interpreters. We know that Western governments have outsourced the recruitment of interpreters to large recruitment agencies. But that does not mean that they can just then push their responsibilities onto the recruitment agencies. The governments are the ones who are the real employers of the interpreters, not the recruitment agencies. And therefore, our governments must take their responsibilities very seriously to protect the interpreters both during and after the conflict. The military forces of our governments obviously cannot operate on foreign soil without interpreters, but they did, many of them, conveniently abandon them when they withdrew their troops. The interpreters then, when the troops left, and also before, were called traitors. They were called traitors by the insurgents, by various other groups in Iraq, Afghanistan, who did not want foreign intervention on their soil. And so they received something called very often night letters. There is a slide which should come up about night letters. Oh, that's the field guide. So we want the next slide if possible. That's that one, yeah. The night letters, which I'm sure our two interpreters who we're very pleased to see here, our two Afghan interpreters, know all about these night letters. They are posted up either on your door or on the door of the mosque or somewhere, brought to your house at night, saying, if you don't stop working for the foreigners, we're going to kill you. The interpreters were initially left to fend for themselves in these situations. So death and injury on the battlefield was followed by death and injury to the interpreters and their families at home. And although some visa programs were finally set up to help them, our governments have generally been very slow to process those visas. And they have been shifting the rules for applications, making it more and more difficult for the interpreters to apply for visas to come to Europe. And that's a situation which we believe has to be addressed through a worldwide approach. It cannot be left to the vagaries of national politics. We cannot leave the interpreters, the translators, to be killed, to starve on the European borders, to be rejected in asylum procedures, or sent back to the country of first entry into the EU according to Dublin. Nor should they now be sent back to Turkey, nor should they be sent home. The security situation in Afghanistan is deteriorating. Last year was one of the worst years for civilian casualties in Afghanistan. Yet our governments are deporting more and more Afghans back home, saying that Afghanistan is a safe country or that Kabul is safe. We all saw the attacks in Kabul just a few days ago. And this cannot be right. The situation in Afghanistan is extremely complicated. It is in Iraq as well. And I think sometimes it's very difficult for people sitting in their offices in Europe to really understand the danger that the interpreters and many other civilians are facing in these countries. Relocation within the country is not a solution. To say that an Afghan interpreter is going to be safe in Kabul, where in fact they might come from a village in a very different part of Afghanistan, it's not feasible, because an Afghan relies on his family support, his family structures. He cannot just go to another part of Afghanistan and live and find work with no money, and where is he going to live? So relocation within the country is not a solution. The coalition, as we've been working, has obviously concentrated on raising awareness of the situation. We've been speaking at meetings like this for about 10 years now. We've published articles and we write open letters to governments. We've worked with very many partners, some of whom are here today. And Red Tea is specifically dedicated to the cause of linguist protection, and they most particularly receive many cries of help from translators and interpreters who are in danger worldwide. So perhaps after I've spoken, we can give the floor quickly to Maya to talk about the kind of mail she gets. Also to talk about the open letters which we write to governments and which she basically initiated. One of our most recent activities was to launch a petition on change.org. I don't know whether we can get the slide from change.org, in support of our UN resolution. And I would ask all of you to sign that petition, to get all your family and your friends, all your distant acquaintances to sign the petition. You just need to go to change.org, look for Protect Translators, you'll find the petition, please sign it. We think it would be an absolutely wonderful result if this Parliament could speak out, if we could hear a strong voice from this Parliament before we hold a similar meeting in the United Nations in New York later this spring. Because we believe that Europe could show the way for our own governments, but also for others to follow. We believe that the means are available, but the will is still really lacking. So we have asked for the EP for its support, and we thank you for giving it to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now the floor is with Dr. Maya Hess from Red Tea.
Thank you, Mrs. Gomez. Good afternoon, everyone. And I would also like to second Linda's thanks to all the MEPs for holding this hearing. Since 2010, Red Tea has been receiving what I call messages of despair from interpreters left behind in Iraq and Afghanistan or stranded across Europe. These messages run the gamut, from an interpreter hiding in Kabul to a linguist currently homeless and living in an Istanbul park, to a translator in a German refugee center fighting deportation. In response, our coalition appeals in open letters to heads of state to remind them that implementing protective policies is not only a moral imperative, but also strategically sound, because the safety of translators and interpreters is closely tied to the safety of all of us, indeed to global safety. Yet we continue to see a disturbing trend among these various policies. Take the United States' extreme vetting procedures and low visa allotments, which have forced US-affiliated interpreters to seek refuge in Europe. or the multiple iteration of President Trump's travel ban, which put an Iraqi linguist with a valid special immigrant visa in detention at JFK Airport. Consider the UK's ever-narrowing asylum parameters, whereby 16 years of service are not sufficient to permit resettlement to safety on British soil. Or think back to President Macron's campaign when he compared the treatment of Afghan interpreters by the French state to that of the Harkis in the Algerian War, calling it a betrayal. Though, to our knowledge, nothing has been done to remedy the situation. And then there is the question of whether a connection exists between the EU's 2016 aid package for Afghanistan and the latter's willingness to accept forced repatriation. The list goes on. And just because I haven't offered examples from other countries does not mean that there aren't any. In fact, for many years and arriving from many corners of the world, the content of my inbox has been a painful reminder of broken promises and abandoned allies. Our language coalition has already written to High Representative Mogherini, who was extremely sympathetic, but said that the influence of the EEAS and Commission is very limited because visa policies fall within the scope of member states' national competences. We believe, however, that some EU services, especially those operating in the hotspots for entry into the EU, could help identify interpreters and facilitate their and their families' passage to safety. We also believe that this process could be simplified by, for instance, suspending the relevant provisions in the Dublin regulation and creating a pan-European visa category. In conclusion, I'd like to express our coalition's fervent hope that the EU will take this critical step and show compassion to interpreters, compassion in the form of legislation, and that we can count on the European Parliament to lead the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have come to the end of this introductory part. I will be soon handing the floor to Marisa to be the moderator of the debate. Just let me reflect upon what you said. Isn't it odd, ironic, that you are only trying to achieve the level of protection that journalists have under the UN, and at a time when we were watching the war, more and more civilians being targeted against the laws of the war. We are watching journalists being targeted, and even journalists being assassinated. Even here in the EU, we are here in this Parliament, we're dealing now with the aftermath of the many questions raised by the assassination of Daphne Caruana Galizia in one of our member states, Malta. So you're only aiming at achieving that level that has so many fragilities. Absolutely, this is a priority, and I undertake with my colleagues here who are here from the other groups to indeed see how we can fast move a resolution calling on our member states to take initiative at the UN to give you that. And I think we can actually move pretty fast if we actually choose a human rights urgency. Isn't this a human rights matter? Isn't this an urgent matter? So for the next plenary, February plenary, it's too late because that has been said. But I commit that together with my colleagues, we're going to work to have an urgency in one of the coming plenaries on human rights, and human rights urgency on indeed asking our member states and our institutions, because of course, yes, a lot falls on member states, especially when they participate in coalitions, weird coalitions, like the ones that operated in Iraq and in Afghanistan, but they also operate under EU CSDP missions. They also operate under a lot of missions under the EU heading, be it parliamentary missions and so on. So absolutely, this is also a matter for European institutions, and the External Action Service has to be up to the job of course, taking care of its responsibilities towards the interpreters that are hired by the External Action Service, by the EU, and of course responsibilities cannot be outsourced. So I take upon myself, and I already put my colleagues here, Carlos Coelho, Marisa, Ernest, and Javier, the co-sponsors, to indeed work for an urgency on human rights, on protection for interpreters and translation, as an initiative to be pushed by the EU at the UN, under the UN aegis. Thank you so much, and now Marisa, take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna.
So let's move on. Thank you again for the introductory remarks from Anna and Ernest and Linda. I will not take much time. I'll try to moderate with less words as possible because we are running late already, and we are running very late, and we need to save time for the debate. So I'll try to keep the interventions now for 10 minutes each, and I hope that you have the time to say everything you need to say. I just want to reiterate what Anna said before, which is not very common that we have initiatives which cover almost all the parliamentary groups. It's not for the first time that we work together in these issues, but it's quite important that we have a joint organization to deal with such an important subject. And I think that this session just started it should be normally, which was people coming to us and asking us to represent them properly. And this is a subject which is not mentioned quite often, or not even often, is not mentioned, period, and then we need to bring it and we need to discuss it. And it was because of Linda and Luis' efforts that when they reached us and asked us to think about it and to work on that everything started. It's just a starting point, of course, and we have a lot of work to do, and we are still trying to find our margin of maneuver, to be quite honest, but it's of utmost importance. We all depend on interpreters, not only here, as also in the field work, and for 9 years, after 9 years being at the presidency of the Maastricht delegation of this Parliament, in Syria, Lebanon, Jordan and Egypt, I totally depend on the interpreters to do my job, my work properly. So let's move on, as I said, and I'm here with Carlos. Carlos from EPP will do the concluding remarks, but he will help me moderating if I need help, and I think I perhaps will need controlling times and things like that. And so we'll start. We have several interventions. We have a video and we have a phone call connection. So we have to try to fit all these issues in this session. And we will start with Eric Ertog, and the other side. Oh, sorry. And Dr. Eric Ertog is one of the experts we invited to talk today on this subject. Amongst other things, he was trainer and examiner of interpreters in several domains, and especially in the social services, and he was also trainer and examiner of intercultural mediators. And he was also the director of the board of the Babel, which is the Central Flemish Community Interpreting Telephone Service. So, welcome, thank you so much. I will not say all the things I should say about you, but it's just to save time. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. I have framed my brief intervention in the form of recommendations. And my first recommendation is that we should clarify the terminological confusion in the field. When you look at media, official reports, publications, websites, you come across the words interpreter, linguist, language assistant, translator, cultural mediator, TERP, fixer, and so on, all mixed, mingled in a confusing avalanche of terminology. Perhaps later in the debate I can come back to the reasons why this is the case, why there is so much confusion, terminological confusion about this. But my first recommendation would be that in any report that there should be clear, transparent and uniform terminology when we talk about these issues. I will then briefly look at the three main categories that concern us. The first are the military interpreters. They are in the service of their respective ministries of defence. They are part of the military team. They are accountable to their military hierarchy, and they usually operate, as Linda suggested, in military uniform. My point here is that there is a vastly uneven knowledge and experience with regard to interpreting among the member states, among the EU member states, and particularly, of course, concerning interpreting in conflict zones. Some member states have more awareness and more expertise, and in others, and I must say including Belgium, there is virtually nothing. So here's my second recommendation, that we should study the available knowledge, pool the available expertise on interpreting in conflict zones, in military interpreting in conflict zones, both in pre-op, during operations and post-op situations, with regard to training, with regard to ensuring the quality of interpreting, military interpreting, done by military people in conflict zones. And secondly, that there should be a commitment by the military to provide training and mentoring during and post-operation. The second group are the contracted interpreters, that is, nationals contracted for interpreting in the country of origin. Now, this is, as Linda also pointed out, a matter of concern because many organisations, institutions actually outsource the employment of interpreters. And again, there are a couple of issues here. The first issue is, are these organisations and institutions sufficiently aware of the need for professional quality, professional performance of these interpreters, which is crucial to their deployment in operations. The safety of the people employing these interpreters actually might depend on the quality of their interpreting. And secondly, when it comes to these contracts, there should be absolute transparency and guarantees in these contracts concerning the safety of these interpreters, again, during and post-operation. In other words, the institutions and organisations turning to these contracting agencies should require, demand a regulated employment status. So here's my recommendation, that military, humanitarian, Save the Children, for example, justice institutions. I'm thinking of the International Criminal Court in The Hague, who regularly goes on fact-finding missions in Africa, for example, or media organizations. When they outsource interpreting, they must require that these two essential, crucial conditions are met. That is, quality of interpreting and contractual safety assurances. The third category, and our last category, I think, is the LECs, the locally employed civilians, whether by, again, the military, humanitarian, justice or media organizations. One or two preliminary remarks. These problems surpass surpass interpreters only, because LECs, locally employed civilians, also include cleaning staff, but also indeed translators or linguists working as office workers. And they too might be at serious risk from a sniper or when a mortar attack hits their headquarters or their field office. However, the risks run by interpreters are different and significantly higher as they go out into the field during often dangerous operations. They, the interpreters, are assumed by the other side to be in possession of highly valuable information. They are visibly seen on operations, on search parties, on roadblocks, identifying bodies, during interviews, always assisting the enemy, the infidel. And this difference in perception of role of the interpreters translates itself in the casualty figures. In Afghanistan, the life of an interpreter is worth more than the life of a soldier. Second, we're also talking serious numbers here. Whether in military operations in former Yugoslavia, in Iraq or in Afghanistan today, or in Congo, in Mali or in Syria today, whether in relief or humanitarian interventions in Haiti or in Somalia, in media reports from Syria or the Ukraine, in fact-finding missions by the ICC in Somalia or Sudan, there's always this need for interpreting. There will never be sufficient nationally recruited staff available. Hence, all these institutions and organizations will continue to rely on LEIs, locally employed interpreters. The US, as was mentioned, employed thousands of interpreters in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Dutch, small country, between 2006 and 2010, in the area of Uruzgan, employed about 120 interpreters. And just one small British regiment in former Yugoslavia alone employed 41 interpreters. So here are the points to consider. The recruitment. There is insufficient knowledge when hiring, when recruiting LEIs about their interpreting skills. What usually happens is they go to a school where languages are taught. They literally take them from behind their school desks, as they did in former Yugoslavia. If they knew English, they were fit to interpret. So there was no idea by the organizations or institutions as to what interpreting actually entailed. Knowing languages is not knowing interpreting, as we know. Secondly, after recruitment, there should be training, including an established system of on-the-job mentoring of the performance of these LEIs. 3, besides the financial and the other contractual arrangements, the LEIs should be contracted under a code of conduct that describes the boundary spanning across the widely divergent tasks of an interpreter in a conflict zone, ranging from indeed non-combatant situations to, and it will happen, Linda, involvement in action. and they should be contracted according to a code of ethics that defines, again, redefines the notions of confidentiality, impartiality and loyalty in the context of conflict between the parties. The notion of impartiality is crucial to the status we are going to accord to these LEIs. Because impartiality and loyalty to whom? And a final point is that the prime concern, of course, and perhaps the one that has convened us here today, is the issue of safety and security of the LEIs, particularly, as was mentioned, when the contracting troops or institutions withdraw from the theatre of war or the conflict zone. When the OSCE withdrew from Kosovo in 1999, they left their LECs behind. And we know some interpreters fled and disappeared. Others went into hiding when they heard their names on the local broadcasts. Some were killed. So organizations and institutions should have the moral duty, but also the contractual duty of care to provide post-operational safety of the interpreters. Often this is now done, as Linda outlined, in the form of financial compensation or professional opportunities, sometimes in the form of relocations, when it's needed and possible. But of course, eventually, there should be a much, much higher commitment to visa and repatriation programs. The incidence of LEIs being killed or their families being threatened, exposed to revenge, these incidents are too horrific and too numerous to ignore. I come to my conclusion. First major conclusion, I think we should continue the academic research in legal and political and interpreting studies, combined with the professional activism that we heard about, to improve and secure the quality and safety of interpreters in conflict zones. Two, and now I turn to the EU Parliament here, I would urge an EU initiative, if possible, something compulsory, mandatory on the Member States, to take measures on the following. First, let's build up and pool our knowledge and expertise on interpreting in conflict zones among the Member States. Let's share that. Two, let's lay down guidelines on contracting and deploying interpreters in conflict zones. Three, let's improve and ensure the quality of interpreting through intelligent recruitment, through training, before deployment, and through constant monitoring and mentoring in the field. Four, remedy the unacceptable situation of LEIs on termination and withdrawal. Harmonisation of the different visa programmes in the Member States is needed, including, if possible, identification of the LEIs at the entry border and including the relocation, the repatriation of the interpreters to Member States of their contractor. One example just, Abdul Ghaffar Ahmadzai fled Afghanistan in 2010 when the Dutch left. He was working for the Dutch military presence. He got to Norway. From Norway went on to the Netherlands, was then sent back to Norway and was then expelled to Turkey. He has now disappeared. Fifth, post-immigration follow-up and care is needed, given the histories of violence and trauma that they have suffered. Measures to ensure appropriate employment, because it was never the objective, the primary objective of interpreters in Afghanistan to leave their country, leave their family, leave their life behind to become a dishwasher or a pizza delivery boy. Finally, I think we need a national, in every member state, but also an EU coordination point for information on interpreting in conflict zones, and support for LEIs. LEIs who will continue to be deployed in zones of conflict and war. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And now we move to Caroline Decroix. She's an expert in foreign girls' rights, and she's also and she was a founder of a collective of lawyers who has been working to try to defend interpreters, and not only, but also interpreters in war zones. Thank you so much.
Merci. Mesdames, Messieurs, cela fait aujourd'hui pratiquement 3 ans que j'interviens en soutien des anciens interprètes afghans de l'armée française pour tenter d'inciter, et je dirais à présent de contraindre les autorités françaises à leur assurer une protection. J'ai pris connaissance de leur situation au mois de mars 2015 lorsque la presse française a relayé la manifestation qu'ils avaient organisée devant l'ambassade de France à Kaboul. Depuis lors, je n'ai cessé d'être à leur côté et je peux aujourd'hui affirmer en toute connaissance de cause qu'en France, non seulement le dispositif visant en théorie à assurer leur protection n'a pas permis de mettre à l'abri l'ensemble des personnels effectivement menacés, mais encore que les autorités françaises, parfaitement conscientes de ces lacunes, à défaut de protéger leurs anciens personnels, font également obstacle à l'exercice de leurs droits. Ces carences sont malheureusement dramatiques puisque concernant la France, elles sont à l'origine de départs réguliers par la voie clandestine d'anciens personnels. Or, l'exil clandestin est particulièrement périlleux. Il faut comprendre que les niveaux de la menace pesant sur ces auxiliaires est particulièrement élevé au vu du contexte actuel de dégradation des conditions sécuritaires en Afghanistan, y compris à Kaboul, que vous connaissez parfaitement. Et... Si tu peux parler un petit peu.
Pour l'interprétation.
D'accord. Okay, merci. La presse française s'est ainsi fait l'écho le mois dernier encore du déferlement de haine qui est intervenu sur les réseaux sociaux afghans du fait de la dernière campagne médiatique qui a eu lieu suite à un attentat dans lequel a été blessé un ancien interprète afghan de l'armée française à la fin du mois de novembre 2017. Cet homme avait été aussi l'objet de tirs qui l'ont visé personnellement au mois de juin 2017. Donc nous avons, nous, en tout cas en ce qui concerne les interprètes afghans de l'armée française, des menaces extrêmement précises et très récentes qui continuent de peser sur eux. Vous savez aussi que malheureusement, les membres de l'organisation de l'État islamique sont présents en Afghanistan, y compris à Kaboul. Et dans les tracts qui circulent, il est précisé que sont considérés comme des infidèles tous ceux qui ont pu travailler pour les armées étrangères, dont les interprètes. Donc je vous présenterai dans un premier temps le dispositif français de protection des auxiliaires, en pointant du doigt les nombreuses failles, avant de vous soumettre des pistes de réflexion assez précises, j'espère, sur les moyens de participation des institutions de l'Union à la protection de ces hommes. Donc, l'armée française est intervenue sur le sol afghan entre 2001 et 2014. Afin de mener ses missions, elle a recruté environ 800 ressortissants afghans, notamment en fonction d'interprètes, qui étaient des jeunes gens parmi les plus cultivés de la société afghane. Tous les chiffres qui seront cités sont des chiffres officiels de l'administration française. Les ressortissants afghans qui ont collaboré avec les forces françaises n'étaient pas recrutés par des agences privées, comme j'ai pu l'entendre. Ils ont servi sous contrat à durée déterminée qui était établi par le ministère de la Défense. Dans un premier temps, ces contrats étaient soumis au droit français. Et puis, à partir de 2011, quand la France a décidé de se désengager, comme par hasard, les contrats se sont trouvés soumis au droit local. À partir de juin 2012, l'armée française a entamé officiellement son désengagement d'Afghanistan. Simultanément, une procédure d'accompagnement individuel des personnels civils, qui a été validée par le président de la République, a été mise en place. Ce dispositif proposait d'une part l'attribution d'une prime de licenciement et d'autre part, selon le cas, soit le versement d'une indemnité d'aide à la mobilité interne en Afghanistan, soit une possibilité de relocalisation sur le sol français. En ce qui concerne la possibilité de relocalisation, le choix des dossiers s'est fait à l'aune de 4 critères. Pas seulement, et j'ai envie de dire uniquement, sur le critère de la menace qui pesait sur le personnel, mais sur la qualité des services rendus, la capacité à s'insérer en France de cette personne. Et ce sont ces 2 critères-là qui nous ont particulièrement posé problème. Alors même que 800 personnes, 800 interprètes ont servi l'armée française, seuls 73 personnels civils de recrutement locaux ont bénéficié d'un visa dans le cadre de ce premier processus de relocalisation. Cette procédure s'est malheureusement révélée source d'arbitraire, n'a pas donné lieu à des décisions motivées et n'a pas non plus permis à ces personnels d'avoir une contestation en justice. C'est donc le 5 mars 2015 que les anciens interprètes afghans en recherche de protection ont commencé à manifester devant l'ambassade de France à Kaboul et c'est à cette époque que j'ai pris connaissance du dossier. En tant qu'avocate, j'ai décidé de monter un collectif bénévole pour tenter de leur assurer une protection, puisqu'il faut aussi que vous sachiez que même dans le cadre d'un refus de visa, les interprètes ayant la nationalité étrangère n'ont pas le droit de bénéficier de l'aide juridictionnelle en France, donc ne peuvent pas avoir d'assistance d'un avocat. Par courrier, nous avons alerté le président de la République et à l'époque, il a été décidé de mettre en place un 2e processus de relocalisation, mais sur la base des mêmes critères, et de laisser seulement 1 mois et demi aux interprètes pour pouvoir déposer une demande de visa, 1 mois et demi sans aucune mesure de publicité. À cette époque, nous nous étions déjà interrogés aussi sur le choix de remettre en place un processus de relocalisation qui, en termes juridiques, est une procédure ad hoc qui ne repose sur aucune base légale et qui, bien évidemment, dans le cadre d'un contentieux, a très peu de chances d'aboutir. Nous avions aussi déposé ce qu'on appelle des demandes de protection fonctionnelle qui, là, recoupaient une base légale de la législation française, mais nous n'avons reçu de la part du ministère des Armées aucune réponse à ces demandes. Donc, dans le cadre de ce second dispositif, 252 interprètes ont pu recevoir une information grâce au collectif d'avocats bénévoles, déposer un dossier, et là, seuls 100 dossiers ont été validés. Donc, vous avez dans le cadre de ces 2 processus 173 personnes qui ont pu recevoir un visa pour venir se faire protéger en France. Pour rappel, sur 800 interprètes qui ont travaillé pour l'armée française. Les décisions de refus de visa qui sont intervenues, là encore, n'ont pas été motivées. Donc le collectif d'avocats entièrement bénévoles s'est retrouvé face à une problématique très délicate parce que bien évidemment il ne comportait pas assez d'avocats pour pouvoir aider les 152 refusés et surtout il ne pouvait pas non plus apporter protection à tous ceux qui n'avaient pas pu déposer une demande de visa avant le mois de juillet 2015. Il n'a donc pu introduire que des contentieux que j'appellerais expérimentaux pour 30 interprètes pour tenter d'obtenir des décisions de justice qui pourraient permettre éventuellement de réouvrir la voie à des réexamens. Et le Conseil d'État, donc, qui est la plus haute juridiction administrative de France, s'est seulement prononcé au mois d'octobre 2017 sur ces recours expérimentaux et le Conseil d'État est venu reconnaître que la situation dans laquelle ces personnels se trouvent caractérise une situation d'urgence. Il précise aussi que lorsqu'il est parfaitement établi qu'ils ont participé aux opérations menées par les forces françaises armées, cette circonstance est de nature à faire regarder les refus de visa comme entachés d'erreurs manifestes d'appréciation de la part de la France. Le problème, comme je vous le disais, c'est que très peu d'interprètes ont pu bénéficier d'un recours contentieux et que manifestement, à l'heure actuelle, le gouvernement français, malgré les déclarations du président de la République dans le cadre de sa campagne électorale à laquelle Mme Fitchett s'est référencée, ne souhaite pas manifestement s'engager dans un réexamen de la situation de l'ensemble des auxiliaires. C'est pour ça que l'Association des interprètes afghans s'est créée. Et depuis 1 an et demi, elle milite pour alerter les autorités françaises sur la nécessité de venir réintervenir pour protéger ces hommes, puisque le dispositif de relocalisation manifestement présente des failles énormes, comme vient le confirmer le Conseil d'État, mais aussi l'OFPRA, l'Office français de protection des réfugiés et des apatrides, puisque bien évidemment les interprètes ont commencé à fuir l'Afghanistan depuis 2015, sont arrivés parfois jusqu'en France. Lorsqu'ils n'ont pas fait l'objet de procédures Dublin, ils ont pu déposer leur demande d'asile et l'Office de protection leur a systématiquement reconnu le statut de réfugié. À cet égard, l'association assiste également les auxiliaires sous le coup de procédure Dublin parce qu'il faut savoir que l'État français ne se déclare pas toujours responsable de l'étude des demandes d'asile de ses anciens auxiliaires. Nous avons des décisions contrastées en fonction des préfectures où les demandes d'admission à l'asile sont déposées. Aujourd'hui, en termes de droit, en France, il ne nous reste plus que la protection fonctionnelle. C'est un combat qui est encore long. Hier encore, il y a eu une audience devant le Conseil d'État pour obliger le ministère des Armées à créer une adresse e-mail de réception des demandes de protection fonctionnelle et nous attendons le délibéré. C'est une voie de droit qui reste encore fragile aussi, puisque si le ministère des Armées persiste à ne pas vouloir répondre aux demandes de protection, ces gens-là n'auront encore comme unique recours que le contentieux et nous nous retrouvons de nouveau dans la problématique de l'accès à l'avocat qui reste un avocat bénévole puisqu'il n'y a pas d'aide juridictionnelle pour ces gens-là. Actuellement, le ministère des Armées essaye par tous les moyens d'empêcher l'accès aux droits de ces personnes. Il tente, pour tout vous dire, même de mettre en avant le fait que les contrats à durée déterminée qu'il a établis ont fini par être soumis au droit local pour s'exonérer de son obligation de protection. Alors, mesdames et messieurs les députés, comment pourriez-vous nous aider ? En France, mais je suppose aussi dans les autres États membres, puisque je sais qu'il y a des difficultés partout. La première piste de réflexion, c'est le visa humanitaire. Le seul moyen aujourd'hui d'apporter une protection en ce qui concerne les anciens auxiliaires afghans, c'est de leur délivrer un visa pour leur permettre de recevoir une protection sur nos territoires. Il n'existe pas en France de droit à bénéficier d'un visa humanitaire afin de venir solliciter l'asile sur notre territoire. L'état du droit est fixé par un arrêt du Conseil d'État de 2015. En France, une personne ne peut déposer une demande de visa humanitaire que si l'administration française a au préalable défini des orientations générales permettant à ses services consulaires d'instruire les demandes. Nous essayons, par le biais du droit à la protection fonctionnelle, de créer une nouvelle obligation de délivrance de visa, mais je vous dis, le juge administratif n'a pas encore tranché. Du côté de l'Union européenne, vous savez que depuis l'arrêt de la Cour de justice de l'Union européenne du 7 mars 2017, X contre État belge, la Cour de l'Union considère qu'une demande de visa introduite dans le but de déposer une demande d'asile ne constitue pas une demande de visa court séjour au sens du Code des visas de l'Union européenne et n'entre pas de ce fait dans le champ d'application du droit de l'Union. Or, dès lors que cette demande n'entre pas dans le champ d'application du droit de l'Union, l'État auprès duquel la demande est introduite peut s'affranchir du respect des obligations, notamment de la Charte des droits fondamentaux de l'Union européenne. Assimilé à un visa de long séjour, le visa humanitaire sollicité dans le seul but de déposer une demande de protection internationale relève donc du droit interne de chaque État membre. Pour écarter l'application du droit de l'Union, la Cour s'appuie également sur la circonstance qu'aucune disposition du droit dérivé actuellement ne vise ce cas de figure, qui bien au contraire a été exclu du champ d'application du droit de la protection internationale par la directive procédure. Selon la Cour, une telle application serait en outre contraire à l'économie générale du système institué par le règlement Dublin III. Alors cet arrêt semble fermer la porte aux propositions très intéressantes qui avaient été formulées par le comité Libé, Liberté civile, justice, affaires intérieures, dans son rapport de 2014, visa humanitaire, option ou obligation. À partir de là, seule une modification a priori de l'article 18 de la Convention de Schengen du 19 juin 1990 qui prévoit que la compétence demeure nationale pour la délivrance des visas de long séjour permettrait aux instances européennes et donc au Parlement de s'engager vers l'institution d'un tel visa humanitaire Schengen, auquel les auxiliaires afghans pourraient avoir recours dans l'affaire qui nous intéresse, et sans être soumis au bon vouloir de l'État qui les a employés. Comme vous le voyez, il s'agit d'un chantier immense, mais qui mérite, à mon avis, d'être défendu d'une manière globale dès lors qu'il s'agit aussi de répondre à la problématique de la gestion des crises humanitaires actuelles et de l'afflux des populations aux demandes de protection vers les territoires des États membres. Comme deuxième piste de réflexion, je voudrais revenir sur l'application du règlement dit Dublin III. Comme je vous l'ai dit, en France, lorsque les auxiliaires, les interprètes afghans de l'armée française arrivent jusqu'à notre territoire, malheureusement, l'État français ne se déclare pas systématiquement responsable de l'étude de leur demande d'asile. Bien au contraire. Il faudrait envisager, je pense, une modification des dispositions du règlement Dublin III que vous pourriez proposer à la Commission dans le cadre du projet de refonte qu'elle a évoqué dans sa communication du 6 avril 2016 pour reconnaître par principe la responsabilité des États membres dans l'étude d'une demande d'asile dès lors qu'ils sont liés aux demandeurs par un lien de droit tel un contrat de travail, comme c'est le cas pour les interprètes, sans leur laisser le choix d'user ou non de manière discrétionnaire de l'article 17 de cette clause qui leur permet de se reconnaître responsables. En effet, l'économie de la législation dite Dublin III n'a jamais été de cautionner une soustraction des États membres à leurs obligations morales et juridiques envers leurs anciens auxiliaires. Je vous remercie et peut-être que dans le cadre du débat, plus tard, nous pourrons revenir sur des propositions concrètes.
Thank you so much. We will come back to this for sure. We will come back to these issues for sure, and thank you for all the detail and the presentation about the concrete cases. And now we will move to a very concrete case. We have Abdul Samad Haimi, and I thank you so much for being here. He's from Afghanistan, and he served the French army in Kabul. So it's our opportunity to know it from the inside. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Chers messieurs, mesdames, bonjour à tous. Tout d'abord, je veux remercier d'avoir accepté de m'inviter à cette édition. Permettez-moi de me présenter. Je m'appelle Raimi Abdul Samad. Je suis né à Kaboul, en Afghanistan. Je suis nationalité afghan. J'ai travaillé comme interprète pour l'armée française en Afghanistan entre les années 2002 et 2014. Et j'ai bénéficié d'une relocalisation en France en 2016, dans le cadre du deuxième processus de relocalisation ouverte durant l'été 2015. Malheureusement, beaucoup d'anciens auxiliaires afghans de l'armée française dont je connais personnellement, certains n'ont pas eu la chance de bénéficier d'une telle relocalisation et je suis très heureux d'avoir l'opportunité de faire état de menaces qui pèsent actuellement sur eux en Afghanistan en partageant mon propre vécu. En ce qui me concerne, j'ai servi comme interprète au niveau des unités de 2002 à 2004 à KMTC, Kabul Military Training Center, pour former les sous-officiers et les soldats de l'armée nationale afghane. Et de 2004 à 2014, j'ai travaillé comme formé les cadres de l'école d'état-major. En plus, j'ai travaillé avec les officiers de renseignement de l'armée nationale afghane et l'adjoint du bureau de secrétariat français. 1. Quand les troupes françaises ont quitté l'Afghanistan, la dégradation des considérations sécuritaires concernant les anciens auxiliaires afghans des armées membres de l'OTAN s'est vite fait sentir. J'ai personnellement été menacé physiquement directement par les talibans ainsi que mon fils. J'ai dû rapidement arrêter l'emploi que j'avais retrouvé comme procureur près du ministère de la Justice en raison de menaces pesant sur moi. J'ai dû décolariser mes enfants quand 2 membres de talibans ont arrêté mon fils pour essayer d'obtenir des informations concernant mon travail avec l'armée française. J'ai craigné aussi que mes enfants soient victimes d'un kidnapping. J'ai donc très vite fini par rester enfermé chez moi. Je changeais de domicile à chaque nouvelle menace. J'ai donc décidé au printemps 2015 de participer aux manifestations organisées devant l'ambassade de France à Kaboul destinées à faire entendre nos problématiques de sécurité aux autorités françaises. J'ai eu la chance de bénéficier pour ma part d'un visa de relocalisation en France et je suis arrivé sur le territoire français le 11 mars 2016. Mais je ne comprends pas comment beaucoup de mes amis, de mes camarades, pourquoi d'autres auxiliaires n'ont pas été sélectionnés. 2. Aujourd'hui, la situation sécuritaire en Afghanistan a continué de s'aggraver depuis mon départ. Par conséquent, la situation des anciens interprètes de l'armée française qui ont été oubliés de l'État français est encore plus précaire, comme on a pu le voir encore en décembre dernier avec les commentaires injurieux qui ont envahi les médias afghans suite à la campagne médiatique relatant l'attentat dans lequel a été pris M. Zainullah Oriachel, ancien interprète de l'armée française. Vous connaissez la situation sécuritaire dramatique qui sévit en Afghanistan, y compris à Kaboul, du fait de l'avancée de l'implantation des talibans et des membres de l'État islamique. Mes collègues indiquent avec raison qu'ils sont considérés comme des traités infidèles du fait de leur collaboration avec l'armée française. Ils ont été identifiés lors de leur mission par les sympathisants des talibans et de l'État islamique, Daesh, des différentes régions en Afghanistan. Le seul point de contact, le pont qui reliait l'armée française, l'armée afghane et les populations locales étaient les interprètes. Nous participons à toutes les opérations militaires en tenue militaire, nous suivrons les patrouilles, nous participons aux fouilles des villages en contrôle des checkpoints et aussi le moment de cérémonie et inauguration officielle des écoles. La majeure partie de mes collègues ont déménagé de leur province d'origine afin de venir de réfugiés sur Kaboul. Mais comme vous avez pu le constater encore ces derniers jours, Kaboul même n'est pas une zone sécuritaire. La capitale est infiltrée par les insurgés et les attentats s'y multipliant. Mes anciens collègues ont donc toutes les raisons de craindre d'y être également identifiés. Ils sont en difficulté pour trouver du travail à cause de leur état de service avec l'armée sur leur CV et doivent rester enfermés chez eux par prévention. Je suis très inquiète pour eux car ils se retrouvent actuellement en situation de désespoir, craignant que les voies de droit en France, qui ne leur sont pour la plupart pas accessibles, ne leur permettant pas de trouver un jour une protection. Des dizaines d'anciens auxiliaires ont donc commencé à fuir clandestinement l'Afghanistan pour rejoindre l'Europe avec leurs enfants. Ce voyage clandestin est extrêmement périlleux. J'aimerais à cet égard me faire la voix de M. Mohamed Bassir Ebrahimi, exemple interprète de l'armée française arrivé clandestinement en France durant le printemps 2017 et actuellement placé sous le coup d'un arrêt de transfert dans le cadre de la procédure Dublin III pour témoigner des risques pris actuellement par ces auxiliaires délaissés afin de rejoindre la France. Voici son récit. La traversée entre l'Afghanistan et l'Europe est un périple où nous sommes en permanence confrontés danger. Le premier passage de frontière entre l'Afghanistan et le Pakistan, Nimroz, est un endroit particulièrement dangereux car les talibans savent que tous ceux qui cherchent à fuir passent par là. Les talibans fouillent tout le monde et le risque est grand de se faire dénoncer par des espions de Kaboul à la solde des talibans qui auraient pu savoir que j'avais travaillé pour une armée étrangère. Une fois la frontière pakistanaise passée, nous avons été emmenés dans des véhicules pour rejoindre la frontière iranienne. Sur la route, nous avons été pris dans une embuscade menée par la police pakistanaise. Nous étions un convoi de 5 voitures. La police a tiré sur les voitures, l'endroit et l'embuscade dépassés. Nous sommes sortis des voitures pour nous cacher durant plusieurs heures dans les dunes avant de pouvoir reprendre la route. Nous avons dû attendre 12 jours au Pakistan. Dans ce genre de situation, les passeurs battent les réfugiés. Et durant cette nuit, nous entendions les femmes crier et appeler à l'aide car elles se faisaient violer par les passeurs dans leur tente. Nous avons ensuite traversé à pied la frontière entre le Pakistan et l'Iran, à traverser la montagne. Un soir, durant cette marche, notre groupe s'est fait stopper par des Iraniens. Nous ignorions qu'ils étaient sans doute des voleurs. Nous nous sommes dispersés et échappés. Ces voleurs nous ont tirés dessus. Nous nous sommes cachés un long moment avant de pouvoir rejoindre notre passeur. Le trajet est très long pour traverser l'Iran afin de rejoindre la Turquie. Nous avons fait des parties à pied et d'autres en voiture. Un jour, je me suis fait battre par un passeur car il voulait que je fasse le trajet dans le coffre de la voiture, mais je n'ai pas voulu. Le passage de la frontière entre l'Iran et la Turquie est extrêmement dangereux. Il faut traverser à pied de nuit. Arrivés presque à la frontière, nous avons été pris dans une embuscade tendue par la police iranienne. Ils nous ont crié de nous arrêter, puis ont tiré des coups de feu. Tout ce qui le pouvait en fui, mais il y avait beaucoup de femmes, d'enfants, des personnes en très mauvaise santé qui n'ont pas pu échapper. Nous ne les avons jamais revus. 25 personnes sur un groupe de 70 ont pu passer la frontière le lendemain. Arrivés en Turquie, nous avons été amenés dans un camp en attendant de recevoir l'argent de nos familles pour pouvoir payer les passeurs et rejoindre Istanbul en voiture. Nous avons attendu 2 semaines à Istanbul avant que les conditions soient suffisamment bonnes pour faire la traversée en bateau de nuit jusqu'en Grèce. Notre embarcation prévue pour 25 personnes en contenait double. Une fois en Grèce, je suis resté dans un camp de réfugiés où l'on m'a remis un document me présentant de traverser l'Europe en train ou en bus. Madame, Messieurs les députés, la vie des anciens interprètes afghans de l'armée française est en danger du fait de leur service aux côtés de l'armée française. la situation sécuritaire de mon pays est devenue intenable depuis la retraite de la majorité partie de troupes de l'OTAN. Je n'ai qu'une seule chose à vous demander aujourd'hui. Aidez-les. Merci beaucoup de votre attention.
Merci à vous et bienvenue. We now move to José Manuel Rosendo. He's a well-known Portuguese journalist. He's now editor at National Radio Antena 1, and he's a war correspondent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. A special good afternoon for all the interpreters. I think it's because the place, I'm talking like a politician, but it's not. This is a very important issue, and it's even more important when a center of political power decides to speak about. It's also important that this approach be consistent in the actions that can be followed. We are talking about people who, after giving their best, they rest without protection and expose it to additional dangers because of the work they have done. And it's important that those most directly interested can speak themselves about the problem, like Abdul today. Because sometimes, and when we talk about some wars or conflict zones, we talk about Afghanistans, but we don't have the Afghanistans themselves saying what they think about the war, and we can say the same about a lot of problems. So that's important. The presence of Abdul Rahimi today here. And it's a little bit ironic, but we are talking about interpreters, and I, like a Portuguese, I must speak in English. So because we don't have translation today, I'm sorry, but I must to say that. And so, for me...
It's just because this is the room of Greens group, parliamentary group, and they don't have Portuguese MEPs, and so they don't have right to have Portuguese language, and that's why we are all speaking English.
So it's like to be in the conflict zone without my fixer. So I'm alone. So, like Dr. Eric Hertog said, the words are important. I have the idea that my experience of working with interpreters, it's very different from when they work with the armies. With the journalists, I think it's a different reality. So I have a feeling that the armies need more the translation, real translation. The journalists, we need everything. So we need an interpreter, we need a guide. Usually we call it a fixer. And we need also a friend, because the war zone, sometimes we need a friend near us. So these kind of people, they suffer the consequences of their work with the armies, but they may also suffer from working with journalists. It depends on each conflict and every moment of the conflict. And we know that everything can change in a second. And it is not by chance that they are known as the, I don't know the expression in English, but our angels behind us, okay? Anjo da guarda.
Guardian angel.
Guardian angel? It's, okay, thank you. So, I don't know, and sometimes they are the first victims in the battlefield. So, and it is also happens that when it is not the fixers, maybe others, like the drivers, also happen, the drivers. So we need to understand all this kind of complex situation. More than saying what should be done to protect these people, it may be more helpful to tell you about 2 or 3 moments of my life with my fixers. I remember that in August 2008, when many journalists go to Libya by the border with Tunisia, 4 Italian journalists were in a way to reach Tripoli, where Gaddafi still resists. We were in Zawiya. I, my fixer, and another Australian journalist, we decided to stay and wait for the next day. It was night, and it was no longer possible to work in Tripoli. Traveling at night did not add anything to our work. It just made it more dangerous. The 40 or 50 kilometers could be made the next day during the day. My fixer suggested, and we do it. The 4 Italian journalists made a different decision. They were kidnapped, and the driver was killed. A good fixer is halfway, half report made. But it takes time for you to gain confidence in a stranger, in a very difficult ground, with danger at every corner. If this confidence is built, a fixer can be a real friend and a true guardian, a true angel for the journalist. They can be our eyes. We can do our work very well, but we do not always detect minefields, snipers, or people that are not confidence people. And because the interpreters, we are talking about people, and the people, they have a name. So I would like to say the names of some of my guardians, if you don't mind. Lait Zelfa, Mohammed Fargali, Araz Maman Fadiyani Turk, Wazir, Hassan Mahdi, Ashraf Mahmoud, Oleg Semonov, Munib Shah, Rajai Mukahal. All of them are my friends right now. So one of the rules that I try to observe is not to give voice in my reports to the people who work directly with me. I broke this rule once with the fixer who worked with me in Kobani. When we entered in the theater of Kobani, Ashraf asked me not to walk through the garbage inside the theater. There was a fear that the Islamic State would have trapped the place. Ashraf told me that he was part of the university shore and who had sing in that theater. I asked him if he remembered what he had sing. And without anything else, Ashraf began to sing. So, a beautiful voice, and I recorded. Ashraf sing and cry was the opening sound of my report. I remember also Laid. We are on the way between Nasriya and Basra, and we have been taken hostage on the way. Even today, I believe he saved my life. He did not tell me at the time, but he told me later that he convinced the kidnappers that I was a poor Portuguese journalist and that no one would pay a ransom for me. So we got nothing, just the closest we had on. I spent more than 2 weeks in Iraq, assisted by other Portuguese journalists. I made sure that Laid stayed there too and kept him with me until I returned to Baghdad. Laid lost the car. I lost the equipment and the money that would pay Laid and the man who had taken me from Jordan to Baghdad. I can still see the moment when I say goodbye to Laid. He left the hotel, the Mount Lebanon, which after was destroyed by an attack, and Laid never looked back. He wanted to go alone. He did not know how he would face his wife and children. When I returned to Portugal, I sent money to pay for Laid's work. I sent him a small amount to help with the loss of the car. And I sent money to Jordan to pay for the trip between Baghdad and Amman. And this, it was very important. Not for the money, but because 3 years later, when I need to enter Lebanon on the second day of the war in 2006, the man who I had paid the money after I arriving in Portugal helped me. I call him. When I ask him how I can go to Beirut, he told me, you go to Damascus and I go to pick you there. And it was. I left Lisbon in the early afternoon, arrived in Damascus at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and at 8 o'clock I was live to my radio station from Beirut. This is the trust I told you before. And I also remember how in Lebanon, going from Beirut to the south, when Israel was bombing the south of the Litani River, I remember seeing our driver in prayer, looking at the sky while the beds of sweat going down in his face. I remember in the Turkish Kurdistan, when we have gone to a village connected with the PKK, on our return we are arrested and taken to an army facility, 2 journalists, 2 Portuguese journalists, and 2 young Kurds who were our guide and driver. The journalists, we have been detained and taken to court for a full day, but with no violent interrogation. The 2 young Kurds were interrogated separately, beaten and threatened. To have a good fixer or just someone doing good translations can make all the difference. A good fixer costs a lot of money, and journalists do not always have the money. And that was already costing me a lot in Afghanistan, where the interpreter who was with me and who also drove the car made an approach too fast to an ISAF army camp. We are not shot by chance. It is important to find a fixer that tells us that we cannot stay anymore at the hotel where we are because it's too dangerous. We realize this when, in fact, something happens at this hotel. It is important to have a good fixer who knows the person to talk to when we need to cross one place where we have a curfew. These people, they risk their lives, making themselves pay for it, that's for sure, but they risk their lives. And many of them continue to risk their lives when we return home. We go and we return. They stay. And sometimes they are marked, like with a stamp in the face. In the case of journalists, we can do little for them. If you think our bosses sometimes do not understand the importance of a fixer and don't want to pay for them, you can realize what we can do. I do not know what the journalists can do except to keep in touch, even for a possible return to keep friendship that in many cases is built, and in some cases, as happened with me, offer them shelter when they have the opportunity to go to Portugal. I have been a lucky man. In the majority of the cases I have worked with good men. Maybe some chance put them in my way, but I thank everyone, because without them I would not have been able to do my job. I do not know what kind of information is coming to the European Parliament about the work of the fixers, but I know what I see in the conflict zones where I have been. And what I can tell you is that it's absolutely normal to see many fixers and journalists without any kind of protection, equipment of protection. In zones where the conflict is not very intense, it's the most frequent. For the interpreters who work with the armies, I think that is the most delicate situation. Usually, these military forces are considered invasors, and many times those who work with them are considered traitors. It is obvious that these people and families need additional protection, and it is the responsibility of those who are them to ensure who contracts them. And even the possible argument that the contract does not provide such protection is not acceptable, because in many cases the state of necessity of those who have to feed a family in a conflict zone, they will accept any conditions that they give them some money in the end of the day. Anyone who works with us in such harsh and dangerous conditions deserves our respect and should receive protection that avoids dramatic consequences. A day, just a single day, together in war can be a friendship for life. Because we eat together, we sleep together, sometimes on the ground, and some people do not want to know about it. That's all. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry for my English. I know it's not perfect, but I think it's really bad, but that's what I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was perfect. And we feel the same fears and all those things. Yeah, it's true. So now we'll move to Max Duncan. Duncan is here not only to talk with us, but also then we will present a video that the screening of Frozen Out that we have the possibility to have here. And after that, we'll have a connection to Afghanistan. Because we'll have the opportunity to talk also with another interpreter who is still in Afghanistan. So, and then we have time for debate. Max Duncan is a filmmaker and journalist, and he produces also the commentaries like the one we are going to see afterwards, and he's working for The Guardian, PBS, the BBC, and Al Jazeera. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'll skip most of my introduction because I'm very conscious of time. But what I will say simply is this is a film that I made exactly a year ago, and it focuses on and Mati, who are two former interpreters for the US military in Afghanistan, who basically tried to go to the EU and got stuck on the border in Serbia trying to get into Hungary. The film was seen by Luis Pinto and Silvia Camilo, as Linda Fitchett pointed out, and they got in touch with me. I'm very pleased that the media can play a role in a process like this, and hopefully we can make a change. That's all for the... Oh, one thing I will say, sorry, is that you'll notice that who's the main character in the film, his face has been blurred out. In the original film, it wasn't, but because of what happened to him since, we decided to take the film down from the website, and all versions now that are shown have his identity obscured, and I'll explain why that is later.
I think that we can move directly to the phone call.
Well, I think that's probably the best thing. What I will just do is give a tiny bit of introduction to what happened in the year since. Basically, the two of them did manage to leave Serbia. They both ended up in a closed camp in Hungary where Mati managed to leave on mental health grounds to be released from the closed camp and eventually actually made it to France. But as you can imagine from what we've heard about how France is treating its own interpreters, he hasn't had any success in his asylum attempts. What happened to the main character is that he actually was stuck in the closed camp for 4 months and basically eventually felt that he had no other choice but to return to Afghanistan, which is where he now is. So after that whole journey, he's ended back in the same place where he began and feeling very unsafe. He's applying for a third time for a special immigration visa, but he's not hopeful. So hopefully we can get him on the line for a couple of questions.
While we have translation, let me just tell everyone that for technical reasons there will be no interpretation from the phone call, so it will be in English. We cannot do it for the French or the Italian or German, so I'm sorry, we do apologize for that, but there's no possibility, so it will be in English.
Okay. Shall I try that with this
Yes,
on speaker?
Please.
Hello?
Can everybody hear that?
Yes.
Hi, it's Max. We've been trying to get you on the normal phone, but now I've called you from FaceTime. Can you hear me?
Yes, of course. Go ahead, man.
Could we put it up a little bit? Hi. Okay, I think this is probably all right. So we just want to ask you a couple of questions while we have you. Thanks for taking the time to speak to us.
It's a little quiet, isn't it? Could we turn the
could
volume
you
up?
tell us a little bit about your situation now that you're back in Afghanistan? What's the situation now?
Hello? Yeah. I think you better know about my situation when I was in the European Union for about a year. And after I came back I was sent to Bulgaria after I spent 4 months in Hungary in a closed camp. Then I voluntarily came back to my home.
Okay, and what's the situation now in Kabul? Do you feel safe?
Yes, of course. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, we can hear you. Okay, I'll tell you
Yes,
what.
of course. Go ahead, man.
Okay, I think this may be a problem actually. I think what I'll do is I'll explain your situation a little bit, and anybody who wants to get in touch
Can you
with
guys hear me?
I think we'll end the call now because I think it's not going to work. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Hello?
Oh, well, sorry about that. We did do a test. So I explained a little bit about his situation now, but essentially that is that he's back in Kabul after spending the best part of a year leaving and on a trip that took a year, basically. Yeah. He's brought his family to Kabul because he's from Khost in
I was in the European Union for about a year. And after I came back I was sent to Bulgaria after I spent 4 months in Hungary in a closed camp. Then I voluntarily came back to my home. Okay. Yes, of course. Go ahead, man.
I think we're getting a lag. I think that's from about 2 minutes ago. Okay, I think.
Can you guys hear me?
And so a former captain of his, who I spoke to as well during the making of this film, is trying his hardest, as are an organisation in the US, No One Left Behind. They've also said that they're going to try and help him. But he's already applied twice. This is the third time. He's hoping for third time lucky, but I don't think he's optimistic. I spoke to Mati, his friend, yesterday. He's now in Paris applying for asylum, but he's already been denied once and told to return to Bulgaria, which was their point of entry into the EU. But they had such a bad time in Bulgaria, including being in the Harmanli camp, which was infamous for having pretty horrible conditions. They don't feel that there's a future for them in Bulgaria. So Mati is now thinking of giving up on France and perhaps actually returning to Afghanistan as well. But definitely to Kabul, there's no way that either of them can go back and live in their hometowns. Yeah, so that's that.
Thank you so much. I've been told that we have here with us Atmar. Oh, Atmar was also is also from Afghanistan, and was also working for the USA. Do you want to say something?
First of all, I would like to thank everybody who's listening, and thank you very much, European Parliament, for inviting me to the meeting. I'd like to say a few words because the time is running out. I see it's till 5:30. Yeah, you said I worked for the USA Army in Afghanistan, in Kunar province, and then it put my life in risk in Afghanistan because of working for the USA Army. And then I had to leave Afghanistan because of risk, that my life was in risk, that they were looking for me, the bad guys. And then I passed a really difficult journey from Iran, Bulgaria and Turkey, and this way. Sorry, I have to mix the Dutch with the English because it's... so I passed a really difficult journey to here, and then I've been here for about 2 years, and after 2 years I was here rejected that we cannot accept your case, and now I'm waiting for the court, that I have to go to court. As if I look back on my situation in Afghanistan, what I did for these people, I'm really disappointed what I did, because I started learning English, and then I learned it, and I went to work for the USA Army in Afghanistan. And it was the key point what I was looking. We were the people who were making contact between the local people and the army. And and these people got in risk because of working for the USA Army. If we had not worked for the US Army, we were not in risk, actually. So that was the reason. And then after being in risk, I had to leave Afghanistan to come here and pass these difficult journeys, difficult ways, hard ways, because what I saw on the ways and what happened to us, many difficulties we faced. So I would like everybody who is here and everybody is listening, everybody who is in European Parliament, not only European Parliament, but on the people, to help these people, because these were the people, these were your arms that you were using them for yourself. Now you don't have to leave them to the mercy of those people who are in Afghanistan, and don't let them to be killed, and provide them safety. It was raining, they came to shelter. You have to give them place to live with you together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. We have like half an hour for debate and for comments, and then we have the concluding remarks. And I would ask you, I already have a request, and I would ask you, those who want to take the floor, just to make a sign to me during the first intervention, in order that we can more or less be fair in terms of distribution of the time. Please, sir.
Let's see, you can hear me? Okay. Yeah, hello, my name is Markus Grotjan. I'm an active duty captain of the German Army, and I did a tour of 7.5 months in Afghanistan. And after that, I'm the chairman and the founder of the mentorship program in Germany. We try to help more than 1,000 former locally employed, what was the name? Employed, no, not employed, locally, employed civilians, sorry. So we try to help them all. And while doing that, we found out that only 30%, in Germany at least, are interpreters, but we try to help them for sure as well. And I think to avoid such fates, we saw in the movie It's not only that we should look at it on a political way, but also on a hands-down way. You know, these people need maybe someone to call them, and no one left behind, which I'm also in a very good contact with, and also our mentorship network. We are always doing this in our free time, so we can't go to Serbia and help them. But I'm quite sure if there would be a foundation which maybe with the backup of some organization involved or nations involved, that these fates could be at least maybe not avoided at all, but that this could be made better. And therefore I founded an organization in the last November, an international organization, to reach out to NATO, as they are one of the most global active players, but also to the UN and to EU, as they all have their own missions and they all employ their own locally civilians, to ask for help myself, because we try to avoid such situations and such problems, but this we can't do in our free time. You need a budget for such things. And that's why I'm here. I'm very grateful that you bring up this topic. You can't stress it enough, even though I'm not totally agree with you that the interpreters are not the only one which are on very high danger. And it's not that high danger in a mission which should qualify to help afterwards. It should be if you are in danger because you work for us. That should be the thing. Otherwise, we should only talk to the guys who were the bomb disposal guys, because actually in the mission they had the most dangerous job, but it doesn't count. For us, it's not important if you are a safety guard. If you were threatened afterwards because you work for us, I think we should be, we should help them afterwards, no matter how important the task was within the mission. And I mean, even a cook is important for the mission. Without food, you don't get the troops anywhere. And without a safety guard, who in some cases fought violently against the furious attacks of Taliban for several attacks, and then they had to leave. So we should also help these. Thank you.
Lucia Ruiz Rosendo, I come from the University of Geneva. I was going to ask if it is possible to speak in Spanish.
So, is there a Spanish interpretation? No. But if you...
Okay. I have been carrying out a study on the role of the interpreters who worked for the ASP4, the Spanish Armed Forces in Afghanistan, and the situation is very similar. I have heard and listened to with great interest to all the presentations, but I have a question or a comment, I don't know. Many interpreters who worked for the Spanish Armed Forces are now in Spain, yes. But I think the protection does not end there, because we have now the problem with these interpreters that they don't have enough training to work in the market. So I think it is important. They were very young when they worked for the Spanish Armed Forces, and they were studying at the University of Kabul Hispanic studies. They didn't finish, they couldn't finish, and so they arrived in Spain, they were 20, 21 years old, with no training at all. And so I think it is also important not only to give visa and to give this kind of protection to the interpreters, but also to offer some kind of training before helping them to work in the market. So I think it is also important to analyze what can be done and to what extent protection ends with the allowance of visas. I think this is now we are working on that. I just wanted to share this concern with you, and I would like to know what you think about that. So thank you very much.
From the two of you, I don't know who asked for first for the floor. Okay, so.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much for this brilliant panel, and thank you so much for organizing this. My name is Sarah de Jong. I'm a political scientist working at the Open University in the UK. I've been studying this issue in different countries, and particularly carrying out field work in France, Germany, the UK, and the United States. And I want to just reinforce some of the points that have been made on the basis of my study. The first one is, of course, the point of there's no coherent approach. So even though people together go on a mission, when it comes to the protection of the people who support them, who are crucial to the mission, there's no coherent approach. Now, sometimes, of course, when there's no coherent approach, that's not a problem. But in this case, as we have heard, people really suffer. I mean, people die as a result of that. And so it's really important that there would be a coherent approach. The second point is that, as Caroline has really eloquently described, the protection and relocation schemes are not only different in all different countries, but there are incredible gaps in each of those protection and relocation schemes. And this indeed results in people trying their luck in a different way, namely coming as asylum seekers traveling over land. And there again we see that the asylum system is not equipped to respond to those cases. And then I think the final point, which was also made over there, which I think is really important, is that both protection and settlement is an issue. So it's not just a question of relocating people to the country. Once we have people in the country, we need to make sure that young men whose existence was based on contributing to society can also carry on contributing to society. And then finally, perhaps as a political scientist, my study is really on the claims for rights and protection, both by LSE themselves, which I'm really happy indeed can speak here today in their own name, but I'm also studying those people who support them. And I've worked on the issue of migration for a long time, and it is really overwhelming how in this particular case, veterans, active military, lawyers, journalists, have come together, and each of them is making a claim. Civil society organizations like the ones who are organizing this particular session. And so this is really a call from civil society to the European Parliament to please do something about this issue. And I think it's astonishing that there is such a large-scale support that has been shown in the media, it has been shown through voluntary work, has been shown through petitions. And so I welcome really here also the collective effort of everybody. And I think I just wanted to reinforce some of these points made here based on my research. Thank you.
Thank you for the floor. My name is Nino Djordjevic, and I'm a freelance interpreter who also works for the European Parliament. And I have a question for Mr. Rahimi and the other gentleman interpreter from Afghanistan. It might sound a bit naive because working here, it's the safest environment possible. And I was wondering, what were your motives or reasons that you actually started to work with foreign armies in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in other conflict zones around the world? And is it purely economical? Because you know that by starting to work for foreign armies, occupation forces, you expose yourself and your families and exposed to risks. Yeah. And maybe it's also a question for Mr. Duncan, who knows the people who were in the video and could maybe shed some light on this as well. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take two more, and these are the last ones. When I asked you to show your hands in the first intervention, nobody did it. Nobody. So I have to manage. Okay, three more, very short, because I have to come back to the panel and to give also opportunity to you to answer. So, 1, 2, 3. Okay? So please, sir. No, on your back, it was the first.
Of course, the urgency to relocate, to bring these people over here, the interpreters, translators, mediators, if I use a broader term. And the thing is, there could be a match. I am Pascal Ridloff, by the way, from the European Network for Public Service Interpreting and Translation. What we deal with on a daily basis is interpreting, translation, between public service, social services, hospitals, etc., here in Europe and the immigrant. And it happens that the languages we most need are Pashto, Dari, Arabic, the languages that come, of course, could come via these interpreters towards us. But what is lacking on each of these levels, interpreting in war zones, interpreting at the frontiers, at the borders, interpreting within public services, social services, is policy. Because what you're doing today in the Parliament could be the start of something nice, something very beautiful. To start a process of building policy at these three levels, coherent policy, for former interpreters in danger zones, in war zones, to be able to come here and to work at our boards, to be trained, of course, and to work in our services, at our borders. But there has to be policy to get them here. There has to be policy to get interpreting integrated at our borders. And there has to be policy at a European level, not only at national level, because it's lacking, policy to build coherent interpreting provision in our services here. If somehow one would be able to do that, there could be a win-win. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now you.
Thank you. I'm Isabel Hegerik. I'm the Secretary of the World Association of Sign Language Interpreters. So I want to thank everybody for being here, for making this possible. As a partner of the committee, we are very thrilled that this is happening, not only thinking about spoken languages, but also sign language interpreters. The reason I did not put up my hand is because I just want to reply to the question of the man asking for motivations of why people become interpreters. There has been a study at the University of Granada by Anna Martin and Maria Gomez Amic, and they actually looked at why local interpreters in Afghanistan become interpreters. So there's a study on that. So they did in-depth interviews, and it's not only economical reasons, but also some of them just want to be better at English at the end of their interpreter assignment, and they want to open opportunities to maybe leave Afghanistan. And so I can send you, or I can give you the reference to that study if you would like to know more about that.
And finally.
Bonjour. Oui, bonjour. Pour clore le débat, donc moi je m'appelle Quentin Muller, je suis journaliste. J'écris un livre en ce moment sur comment notre État français en fait gère le cas des interprètes afghans. Moi je voulais dire que ce soir que j'ai honte d'être français quand je vois comment notre État français refuse, à quel point notre État français refuse de prendre en charge ces interprètes-là, comment il les abandonne et comment il bloque toutes les démarches judiciaires de Caroline Decroix, qui est une avocate très courageuse. J'ai honte d'être français et je pense que cette affaire des interprètes afghans doit poser question sur nos agissements en tant que pays occidentaux au Moyen-Orient notamment. Quelle posture on prend dans ces pays-là, et on doit poser la question surtout par rapport aux interprètes. Ce ne sont pas des marchandises, ce sont des hommes avant tout, et on ne peut pas se servir de ces gens-là et ensuite les rejeter. On a un devoir de les aider, de les protéger, et un devoir surtout de mémoire par rapport à nos agissements dans ces pays-là en tant que pays colonisateurs. Donc voilà, je pose ça là ce soir, et je crois que c'est les derniers mots. Voilà, merci beaucoup.
Merci, and we now come back to the table. I don't know who wants to start here. Yes, of course, but I don't know who wants to start. Do you want to start answering on the motivation for being interpreter?
Un petit peu l'information de la raison comment les gens ils vont recruter comme interprètes. C'est pas juste le problème de l'économie comme Madame il a expliqué. C'est une chose très importante, c'est l'augmentation d'apprendre la langue qu'il aime beaucoup, comme moi. Je suis un étudiant de lycée franco-afghan en Afghanistan. Et le moment que la force française en Afghanistan, ils ont besoin d'un traducteur ou interprète parce que c'est un besoin. Sans l'interprète, et on ne peut pas progresser. Et surtout, les partis militaires, les soldats, les sous-officiers afghans qui ne savent rien anglais, par exemple, ni français, eux, ils ont un interprète qui traduit les cours en même temps dans les salles de cours et en même temps dans les zones. Par exemple, en 2002 jusqu'à 2004, j'ai travaillé avec les soldats et les sous-officiers dans AKMTC, c'est un centre de training pour les Afghans. Là-bas, environ, que je dis, 5% des soldats, ils ne savent pas ni anglais ni français. Dans ce cas, un militaire français, comment il va expliquer pour les soldats, pour apprendre les cours, pour augmentation le type de professionnel pour un soldat ou un officier. C'est certes qu'ils ont annoncé de traducteurs ou interprètes. Ça c'est un. Deuxième point. Et troisième point, à cette époque, en 2002, il n'y a pas assez le traducteur franco-dari au persan. Juste les élèves qui ont déjà terminé son bac au lycée franco-afghan, ou ils sont capables de traduction, les cours. Au début c'était un peu difficile, mais un peu ça va bien marcher pour apprendre les vocabulaires militaires. Et jour par jour, ils ont fait leur traduction et c'est très très bien progressé. Ça c'est la raison.
Atmar.
According to the question of brother, I would like to answer that my motivation for working with the US Army was my language improvement. And I really, when I was a child, I really liked English. And I started learning it, and I learned it. And then I went to join interpretation job. So that's the motivation also. And also there is also economic problem also. As you know, in Afghanistan, there is nothing like as in Europe. There are a good system. There is no good system in Afghanistan. You cannot find a job. So that was also something behind it, like economic problem and the improvement of the language. Thank you.
So now I move on the reverse order, I think. So Duncan, you start.
Well, I mean, I don't think I'm better qualified to talk than either of my colleagues, but I think in their cases it was a mixture of wanting to improve their English and economic opportunities. There not being better jobs for well-educated people around. And I think also, you know, in a country which has an occupying force that's English-speaking, a lot of other jobs are also related to the speaking of English, for instance, construction, that kind of thing. So actually, Mati had also worked in a company that was doing construction work for the US Army, so that also involved interpreting work, and that was a good way to make a living without many other options, I think.
I really don't know what I can say about, but I think it's very important, the integration, like you said. It's not just important to get the people from Afghanistan or Iraq to Europe. It's important to give them a real integration with education, maybe with a nice job, because if we don't do this kind of integration, they come for nothing. So I think it's the most important point, integration. Yeah. That's all.
I would like to add a further motivation, which hasn't been mentioned, I think, and I don't know whether it applies in the cases of the colleagues who are here. But I did some work with the interpreters who worked for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, and for the community interpreters who were contracted and hired by the OSCE in Kosovo. And apart from economic and professional opportunities and an interest in language, in these two cases, what was probably the most or the deepest motivation was to be part of an historical process, to participate in that, to play a role in that, to advance the future of their region or their country, and to be a voice in that. And that applied in these two cases. So I don't know, I can't speak for the people here, but that is surely something that I experienced and that I know to be true in these two cases.
Oui, alors sur la question, moi quand dans ma présentation j'avais pris soin de dire 800 personnes parmi les plus cultivées de la société afghane, parce que le français n'étant pas une langue particulièrement répandue en Afghanistan, on a souvent été chercher ces jeunes, comme l'a dit M. Rahimi, parfois âgés de 16 à 17 ans, au lycée Estéclal de Kaboul. Donc on est vraiment venu les recruter juste après le bac pour travailler avec l'armée française. Donc ce qui me fait dire aussi en effet qu'il y a une double obligation morale en plus envers ces personnels qu'on a été chercher et qui n'ont pas travaillé avec nous pour des raisons économiques. Quand on parle aussi avec eux, en effet, il y avait vraiment aussi le sentiment de vouloir participer au rétablissement de la démocratie dans leur pays. Ils avaient vraiment beaucoup d'espoir en fait et ils sont extrêmement déçus aujourd'hui. En ce qui concerne après leur intégration, une fois sur le sol français, pour ceux qui ont la chance d'avoir le précieux sésame, on se rend compte aussi que ce fameux processus de relocalisation, ad hoc, juridiquement sans aucun fondement, pose aussi des problèmes pour ceux qui arrivent chez nous, puisqu'on leur dit d'accord, vous êtes relocalisés, mais vous n'êtes pas des réfugiés. On ne vous a pas donné un titre sur le fondement de la Convention de Genève. Donc ça va créer plein de choses problématiques. Par exemple, vous n'allez pas pouvoir avoir l'échange de votre permis de conduire. Vous n'allez pas pouvoir bénéficier de l'aide à la formation pour les réfugiés, parce que votre titre de séjour ne porte pas la mention réfugié. Donc vous avez quelque part une forme de double peine. Vous êtes relocalisé, en fait vous êtes un réfugié, et en fait on ne va vous donner aucun des bénéfices attachés au statut de réfugié en France. Donc en effet, c'est une problématique puisque vous avez des gens qui avaient un niveau culturel, social quand même relativement élevé dans la société afghane et qui se retrouvent en France sans aide à la formation, à devoir prendre des métiers sous-qualifiés et il y a manifestement une forme de souffrance aussi, en effet, après, dans la façon de s'intégrer sur le territoire français.
Thank you so much. And before I give the floor to my friend and colleague Carlos Coelho to the concluding remarks, let me just say that, of course, some of the comments that you did, both in terms not only of the protection, but also the training and also the needs that we have currently, and if it would be more or less easy if there would be political will, which it's the main difficulty that we face is the lack of political will to deal with this situation. And of course, all these comments we are taking it into account for sure. And I don't want to repeat what Anna Gomes and Ernest Urtasun said in the beginning, and I don't want to pre-announce what Carlos is going to say in the conclusions when it comes to the concrete issues that we deal at the Parliament, so it will be useless if we are all talking about the same, so I will not do it. But Carlos will address a lot of the concrete issues that were raised during the presentations, and a lot of what Caroline said and asked. So I'm not going there. So I just want to thank you all for being here, to tell that these parliamentary groups are really engaged to take part in this debate. Despite the fact that we don't have much margin of manoeuvre, because it's mainly an issue of the member states, but of course we can put pressure and we can help and try to help. And also when it comes to the European ground, and also, for instance, if we can find a way of, as Anna was saying, of writing a joint resolution on this issue, it can help also in the work that is being developed for the United Nations position and resolution on the protection of the interpreters and translators. And I want to just conclude by thanking all who have worked for organizing this meeting and at the different offices, and I think they will forgive me if I give a special thank to Nunu. And but all of them were very important. We could not have this event without them. And the interpreters who were and will still be here translating and interpreting Carlos. And again to Linda and to those who have contacted us in the first hand, and of course mainly Luis and Sylvia. And by saying this, I just want to tell you that today is Linda's birthday, so happy birthday, Linda. It was a fine way of spending your day. Thank you for spending it with us. And we'll try to do our best to give you some gifts. And we have several colleagues from different groups here throughout the day. And just now we have José Manuel and Fernando. Okay, there's no need to say Fernando. We have José Manuel. Okay, okay, I say Fernando. Joining us, we have the Vice President of the Parliament. He was here from also EPP, and we have the different members. They will try to be together, and we also have several interpreters from the Parliament working here and helping us. And thank you for your presence as well. Carlos.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me repeat what Marisa Matias has already told. Thank you so much for all the contributions of all the speakers on the different panels and the testimonies, as well as the questions, comments and contributions from the audience. It was of much benefit to be able to hear from our honourable guests the dramatic situations reported here and the inertia in the response by allied countries to these professionals whose dignity and right to life are threatened daily. It is a fact in a globalized society, translators and interpreters are essential, more so in war zones where they are, as Mr. Rosendo well said, builders of human relations between troops and local communities. Translators and interpreters working in conflict zones place their lives at risk and in many instances are kidnapped, tortured and killed as traitors, prosecuted as spies. Most of them are underpaid and made hollow promises. After their service for their lies, they are deceived, abandoned and left behind to their luck. A report from UNHCR estimated that an interpreter was killed every 36 hours. I firmly believe that this is just not mainly a problem of the United States of America. Most interpreters end up in Europe in terrible conditions, such as detention centres and sleeping in parks and slum houses. It is therefore an international problem that needs to be tackled first and foremost at the international level. But the European Union also needs to engage more actively in addressing post-conflict situations. It is a question of human rights. It's a question that is at our door, at our borders. I hope that we all can agree that as human beings we have a moral obligation to protect those that have their life threatened, and I think we all also agree that we as Europeans, each and every member state, are legally obliged to protect those same people. The Geneva Convention, which was initially drafted to protect Europeans fleeing the war, imposes such obligation. In the European Union in particular, we have not only approximated our laws on the recognition of status of refugee, we have also complemented that status by creating another one, subsidiarity protection. Moreover, we have developed a set of rules that the so-called Dublin risk system we are reforming now to determine the responsibilities of each member state. Therefore, recognizing we have no internal borders and are de facto a single territory. We have also an agency to provide support to member states in this matter. We have agreed to call this complex web of instruments Common European Asylum System. However, the influx of asylum seekers in the past 4 years has demonstrated that this system is not working. I will spare you from long reflection about this topic, but allow me to give you an example I find most relevant in this context. In the third quarter of 2016, Italy was granting to 97% of Afghans the status of refugee or subsidiary protection. Whereas in Bulgaria, the recognition rate was zero. That is why we in the European Parliament have been struggling for a true common European asylum policy and a true common European asylum system. One that works, but above all, a common European asylum system that protects those that need protection. There is at the very least substantial grounds for believing that former interpreters, if returned to their country of origin, would face a real risk of suffering serious harm, or owing to such risk, are unwilling to avail of the protection of their country. And this is precisely the definition of subsidiarity protection. But let us be clear. Only member states can decide to recognise asylum claims. There is an European and international framework when it comes to asylum. However, and this is a very important however, only member states can make a decision. As I said in the beginning, the international scene must be the first forum to address. As mentioned several times today, European member states and all the European institutions should continue to push for this issue in all fora, but in particular in the United Nations. Our competence in this context is much limited. But as members of this House, we will continue to raise awareness, influence our own member states, and surely other European institutions. We need to bring the intentions of the world to this issue. I would therefore be most glad to follow up on the many initiatives mentioned here today, and I have to tell you, Marisa Matias and Ana Gomes and several other colleagues, we have already spoke about what kind of initiatives we can take at the European level. In any circumstances, the conditions to which interpreters are subject remain dramatic. It remains unfair that states profit from interpreter services and to then leave them without protection. At the European level, we could address several issues linked to the interpreter's dramatic reality, such as the list of safe countries of origin. It was referred to during the debate, the lack of winterization or shelter at the countries or first line in Europe, or even the European Union-Turkey deal. However, I believe the stories we have heard here today point out to a much bigger systematic problem. Europe is reacting, not acting, in permanent crisis mode without being able to protect properly those that need protection. The European Parliament from the very beginning called for Member States to deploy all the much necessary means and for the common European asylum systems to be reformed, and quickly so. As negotiator for the European Asylum Agency, I am, and I will, continue to push for Member States to unblock this file and finally approve it. The same goes for every piece of legislation now under negotiation. I think Marisa Matias, and I hope you all can agree with me, it is time Europe delivers. Thank you so much.
Just a final note, I'm sorry, because Caroline was asking about the humanitarian visa.
About the humanitarian visa, European Parliament supported the idea in our report made by a socialist member, López Aguilar, from Spain. We asked for that, but in the Council it was blocked. And as you know, Parliament alone has no legislative capacity. We need to make the decisions by the co-decision procedure. That means Parliament and Council must agree in the text, and if one of them, or Parliament or Council, doesn't agree, we have no law. So Council blocked the humanitarian visa. For now, we are going to still pushing for the issue, but in other legislative instruments.
Again, thank you so much, and I cannot believe that we finished on time. Thank you, especially to all speakers. Thank you.